Wants more strategic ties with Jakarta, and businesses urge streamlined SOPs during MCO. That's coming up. We begin tonight with the Prime Minister's visit to Jakarta. Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin and his counterpart, President Joko Widodo, discussed several issues during their meeting today. Here's a quick recap.
Among others, both leaders talked about the protection of Indonesian migrant workers in Malaysia. The two countries, Jokowi said, needed to develop a system to better address issues on migrant workers to prevent them from becoming victims of human trafficking. Additionally, both leaders expressed their concerns on the anti-palm oil campaign that is happening in Europe and expressed commitment to working together to fight against palm oil discrimination. Jokowi and Muhyiddin also said they will discuss further an agreement to allow official and business travel between their countries amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
Muhyiddin said preliminary discussions on the travel corridor between Malaysia and Indonesia have started at the working level and hopes that both sides can step up talks to work out the SOPs. We want to take a closer look into the arrangement. Is this viable as the number of COVID cases in both countries are still high? We speak to Oh Eson, Senior Fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs.
Indonesia's population, it's about 7 times that of Malaysia, but its daily new cases is only about 3 to 4 times that of Malaysia. But Indonesia indeed has a higher COVID fatality rate, much higher than Malaysia. So again, depending on what measure of pandemic severity you are taking, it would appear that both countries could do more in suppressing their respective pandemic situations. If we are talking about just several senior businessmen traveling between Malaysia and Indonesia, that perhaps would be indeed feasible nowadays. But if you are talking about higher numbers of, for example, workers crossing borders from one country to another, I think that would have to be taken very, very seriously and carefully with a lot of, for example, pre-departure testing and then quarantine upon arrival and so on. And both countries would have to be rather strict on that in order for the RGL to work.
How would this travel corridor shape up to be? Now, if you recall, in August, Singapore and Malaysia started a reciprocal green lane scheme to enable cross-border travel for essential business. But just last month, Singapore announced that it would suspend the travel bubble for Malaysia for 3 months.
Well, of course, this RGL would pale in comparison to the proposed RGL between Malaysia and Singapore, which would see, for example, many more people crossing the borders and so on. But still, I think this Indonesian-Malaysian RGL could be one of the test beds for not only these two countries, but for many other Southeast Asian countries to see whether indeed such an RGL could be maintained by means of both countries being extremely responsible in keeping its COVID pandemic numbers low. Frankly speaking, it's very difficult to permanently maintain an RGL because if the pandemic situation in either country rises significantly, the other country is, of course, very likely to suspend the RGL, right? So again, both countries would have to do a better job in suppressing its pandemic.
We will be discussing further on bilateral relations between Malaysia and Indonesia. That's coming up on Consider This. Yesterday, Senior Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced more economic sectors to open, including night markets. While this move is welcomed by retailers, a standardized SOP and enforcement remain to be a key issue facing businesses. Managing Director of Maidin, Datuk Dr. Amir Ali Maidin, questions Putrajaya's rationale in allowing night markets to open while keeping many retail businesses in shopping centres closed during the MCO.
The intentions can be good, but you don't shut down a mall, a 250,000 square feet building, we're having 500 people in there, one COVID case, and you shut down the whole business for 3 days. Does it make sense? Where is the science behind it? More important, what we do, which is what we want to do. You have a case, we quarantine them, we quarantine all close contacts immediately, we desanitize the whole building or where it's necessary, and let business go on. But this has to be standardized. Someone in, say, one in Penang says something else, somebody in Johor Bahru says something else, and in Pahang is someone else. So decisions are being made arbitrarily by an officer. I don't know whether it's KKM officer or MKN officer, whoever the doctor who's making the decision. But the decision is not the same everywhere. Let's be fair. Let's be fair to all businesses, whether it is pasar malam, whether it's a shopping center, or whether it is people working from offices.
Dato' Amir also questions how SOPs are being introduced without prior consultation with stakeholders.
Whatever you want to come up with SOPs, please call us in. We are here. We want to support the government. We are not against the government. Why are SOPs coming out first on the last minute, and there is no consultation with the industry? We are the one on the ground. We are not sitting on ivory towers here. We are on the ground. We know what is happening in the ground. So please ask us. We are open. Call us anytime. 24/7, Saturdays, Sundays. Just call. Video conferencing is fine. Skype is fine. Call us. We will give our input, and then you decide. I think that is the best thing the government can do now.
Meanwhile, founder of Pemuda Negara, Dr. Afif Bahardin, believes the SOPs are sufficient as it is done in consultation with the top health experts in the country. The approval for night markets to reopen were given as they were considered to be under the small-scale businesses category.
The SOPs announced for reopening businesses is sufficient, and it must be read with our common goals in mind, which is ensuring people are safe and at the same time ensuring livelihoods are protected. There must be a balance between these two. The opening of businesses is a necessary step. Ideally, I believe the government would like to open up the economy. However, we need to ensure that we are ready to do so. An in-depth study and evaluation definitely have go into deciding all this. We allow, and the government allows, small businesses such as pasar malam, barber and car wash to operate because these are mainly small-scale businesses and they are living hand-to-mouth. A complete lockdown would be disastrous for them. They won't be able to survive. Therefore, I believe we need to learn to live in this pandemic. Just because pasar malam is open for businesses, it does not mean that we all have to go there in droves. Each and every one of us must be responsible and play a part in ensuring safety of ourselves and those around us.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Kita kini berada dalam fasa memerangi gelombang ketiga COVID-19. Tanggungjawab dan disiplin mesti berada di tahap yang paling tinggi. Janganlah keluar jika tiada urusan yang penting. Kita mampu meratakan lengkung COVID-19 ini.
Welcome back. Staying on the Prime Minister's visit to Indonesia, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin and Jokowi said they were seeking a special ASEAN meeting to discuss the situation in Myanmar after its elected government was overthrown in a coup this week.
Foreign ministers of both countries will talk to Brunei, the current chair of ASEAN, to try to set up the special Myanmar meeting. Muhyiddin referred to the coup as being one step backward in the process of democracy in Myanmar. Given ASEAN's policy of non-interference in its members' domestic issues, such meetings are rare and arranging one could be a challenge.
More on the latest in Myanmar, US President Joe Biden has called for the Myanmar military to relinquish power, free detained civilian leaders, and lift the restrictions in telecommunications. The US has also expressed its concerns to ASEAN ambassadors in Washington, while saying it is considering sanctions on individuals and entities involved with the military. Meanwhile, another leading figure of the National League for Democracy party, Win Tien, was also reported to have been arrested. The United Nations Security Council has called for the release of all detainees while stressing the need to uphold democracy and respect human rights. US President Joe Biden declared a halt to US support for Saudi Arabia's military campaign in Yemen. The foreign policy shift signaled a new era focused on diplomacy abroad under the Biden's administration.
This war has to end, said Biden, declaring an end to all US support for offensive operations in Yemen, including arms sales. The grueling 5-year Saudi-led military offensive saw one of the poorest countries in the region in deep crisis and instability. The announcement on Yemen fulfills a campaign pledge, but it also shows Biden putting the spotlight on a major humanitarian crisis that the US has helped aggravate. This reversal of policy also comes as a rebuke to Saudi Arabia. In his first diplomatic address as president, Biden also froze plans to redeploy troops from Germany, signaled aggressive approaches to China and Russia, and urged Myanmar military leaders to put an end to their coup.
Hong Kong students as young as 6 years old will be taught about the national security law under a dramatic overhaul of the education curriculum. The guidelines are the latest move by Beijing to crack down on dissent and increase control over Hong Kong.
Circulars sent out on Thursday requires schools to prevent participation in political activities, increase monitoring of employees and teaching materials, remove reading materials deemed to endanger national security, and to report to authorities if necessary. China imposed a new security law in June last year after tens of thousands of people took to the streets in opposition to a proposed extradition bill in 2019.
Australia's biggest state, Perth, will exit a 5-day lockdown after reporting no COVID-19 cases for 5 straight days. The lockdown started on Sunday after a security guard working in a hotel quarantine tested positive for COVID-19.
Australia also said it will lift the temporary caps on citizens returning from overseas after community infections in the country remained low over the last several days. Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced that the federal government agreed to lift the limits on February 15, paving way for more citizens and permanent residents to come home. The numbers were temporarily halved after new strains of coronavirus emerged in the UK and South Africa.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates and info on COVID-19 from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng signing off for tonight.
Perang COVID-19